Hello, HBC. I wanted to share a video this week kind of talking about something that I'm going to be mentioning on Sunday during the worship service. And since this topic is mainly historical, I didn't really think that it was appropriate to include it in the sermon, but I really wanted to look at who the Magi or the wise men were. Where did they come from? Why did they come? And all of those things. And so this Sunday, we're going to be looking at Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 to 12. I really encourage you to read that before Sunday so you know what we're going to be looking at. But one of the questions as we read the Christmas story that pretty much every single person who has ever read this story asks themselves is, who were the wise men? Who were they? Who were the Magi? What is going on here? It seems so mysterious. And the fact of the matter is that we really don't know anything about them other than what Matthew tells us in Matthew chapter 2. At least nothing absolutely truthful. Now, there are some things that we know historically about the group of people that were the Magi, but we don't know anything about these individuals who came to visit our Lord Jesus Christ. And despite the fact that they're thought to be to represent the three sons of Noah. One of them is, if you see any pictures, or a lot of times in your Christmas card, you'll see three different guys. One of them is depicted as being Ethiopian almost every single time, and they've even been given names, Casper and Balthazar and Melchior, however you pronounce that. To be honest, those names are made up. No one knows their names. No one knows who they were. In the 12th century, there was a Roman Catholic bishop of Cologne, Germany, who claimed to have found their skulls. And when Jen and I were living in Europe, we went to that cathedral in Cologne, and we saw the big fancy golden box that the Roman Catholic Church claims that the bones of the Magi reside in. Again, that's a fiction. There's no way they had their bones or anything like that. But nonetheless, the fact that what we see from that, though, is that the arrival of the Magi, the arrival of the wise man, is a mystery, and it would be nice to know who they were. So while I can't tell you who the individuals were that showed up, I can tell you a little bit about the class of people that were known in that time as the Magi. Okay, and so we're going to look a little bit about this. First of all, the fact that they would have been from the east would have been assumed by anyone who read the book of Matthew originally, written in about 50 years later, would have understood who the Magi were. They would have understood where they came from. They came from the east, and they were primarily known as kind of a priestly and political class of people that came from the Parthians. Basically, this empire was east of the Roman Empire, and it was kind of like a rebuilding of the Persian Empire. Now, the Parthians were always a threat to Rome. Rome was never comfortable with the Parthians being there or with their strength. And so Rome was always kind of on edge as far as their eastern borders. The Magi first appear in the 7th century BC as a tribe from the Median nation in eastern Mesopotamia, right? So they go back a long ways. And it may also be that, like Abraham, some historians believe that they came from the area of Ur, where Abraham came from. Now, the name Magi soon came to be associated really with this priesthood within that tribe. And the Magi became very skilled in astronomy and astrology, and they had a sacrificial system that from the outsiders would have looked similar to the one that God gave Israel through Moses. They were involved in various kind of occult practices, including sorcery, and were especially noted for their ability to interpret dreams. And it's from their name that our words magic and magician are derived. A principal element of magician worship in this time was fire. And on their primary altar burned a perpetual flame. It was always going, which they claimed came from heaven. The Magi, one unique thing about them is that they were monotheistic. They believed in the existence of only one God. And because of their monotheism, it was easy for the Magi to adopt to what King Darius of the Persian Empire made the state religion of Persia, Zoroastrianism. It's hard to pronounce as well. But that too was monotheistic. And because of their knowledge of science and agriculture and math and history and the occult, the religious and political influence really began to grow until they became one of the most prominent and powerful group of advisors in the Persian and also the Babylonian empires. They really became incredibly powerful, and they were advisors surrounding the kings in these empires. It's not strange that they're often referred to as wise men. And it may be that the law of the Medes and Persians, as referred to in Daniel and Esther, was founded on the teachings of these Magi, this group of people. Historians say that no Persian was ever able to become king without mastering the scientific and religious disciplines of the Magi, and then being approved and crowned by them as well. And that this group also largely controlled things like judicial appointments. So imagine how Herod felt when this group of kingmakers showed up from the east, an empire that is a known enemy of Rome, showed up in Jerusalem asking for the King of the Jews. That most certainly would have put Herod on edge. A couple other things we know is that the chief of the Babylonian Magi was with Nebuchadnezzar when he attacked and conquered Judah. We know that from Jeremiah chapter 39. We learn from the book of Daniel that the Magi were among the highest-ranking officials in Babylon. And because the Lord gave Daniel the interpretation of Nebuchadnezzar's dream, which no one else in the court was able to do, Daniel was appointed as ruler over the entire province of Babylon and chief prefect over all the wise men of Babylon. You can see that in Daniel chapter 2. And so because of his great wisdom, he had successfully pleaded for the lives of the wise men who had failed to interpret the king's dream. Daniel became highly regarded among the Magi, essentially because he saved their lives. So the plot against Daniel that caused him to be thrown into the lion's den was formed against another group. It was not by the Magi. And because Daniel's high position and the great respect that he had among the Magi, it seems pretty likely that the Magi would have learned a lot from Daniel about the one true God, the God of Israel, and about his will and his plans for his people through the coming king. Because many Jews remained in Babylon after the exile and began to intermarry with people from the east, it's likely that the Jewish messianic influence remained strong in the region until the time that Christ was born. So during both the Greek and the Roman empires, the Magi's power and influence continued in the eastern provinces. It was the Parthians, the empire that the Magi lived under in the time of the birth of Jesus. It was the Parthians that Herod, on behalf of Rome, drove out of Palestine between 39 and 37 BC. And that's when his kingship in Judea began. The Magi from the east. The word literally means from the rising of the sun. It refers to the Orient, who came to see Jesus, were of a completely different people. Not only were they true Magi, but they most certainly would have had a strong influence, and quite possibly even by some of the prophetic writings of Daniel. Most certainly they would have been familiar with Daniel and his writings. They appear to be among the many God-fearing Gentiles who lived during the time of Christ. And what they represent that Christ came to be king both over Judea but also over the Gentiles. Now remember, Herod most certainly would have been threatened by him. We don't know how many came. It could have been 2. It could have been 200 that showed up looking for the King of the Jews, a title that Herod himself had claimed and utterly defended, even murdered, to keep. I look forward to seeing you on Sunday, and thank you for sharing, and be sure to read Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 to 12. God bless.